Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
The mindful approach to real estate investing is about mindset, but it's also about the journey, because the mindset is built on the journey. And today, we're going on one of those again. We're going to talk to Megan Ahern, the Tatty investor, and we're going to hear about how she went from rebel to real estate investor to realtor to real estate entrepreneur. Let's go. This is episode 150 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Megan Ahern. Megan is a rebel turned real estate investor. She's been investing in Lincoln, Nebraska very steadily since 2018 with her husband, over 80 units in and around the area. Also owns a staging company where they've staged a ton of units as well. And they flip, hold, and have sober living houses. Megan, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you. I've been following you for a while and watching your journey. But when was the first time that you thought real estate was going to be something that would take you to a different level in life?
Probably back in 2015, I started kind of learning about it and getting into it. Growing up, my grandparents were real estate investors. They retired off of commercial real estate, but we never saw it by the time I was around. I just always saw they had money and they never worked. And so I was like, I want to do that when I grow up.
That sounds cool.
Yeah.
But what drove you? Was it the fact that you knew that they did it through real estate that in 2015 you said like, hey, I need to investigate this?
Yeah. And my husband was in the military and we kind of kept going back and forth on do we want him to resign? Do we want him to get out? And then kind of what would that look like for our next steps moving forward?
Yeah. And
so we started learning about real estate and we didn't really jump into it full force until he got out of the military.
Yeah, it does. I've had a lot of people who've been in the military on the show, and they've said it's helpful because they do have a fair amount of downtime where they can read. So you two could have been kind of like studying up at the same time. Is that what happened? And then you're trying to figure out like, how are we going to put this together?
Yeah, we were doing the learning phase while he was still in for sure, and listening to podcasts on the commutes and everything. And we actually did 2 deals. We lived in Southern California because he was on Pendleton, but we did a long distance flip where we lost money, and we did a live-in flip where we made money, but we weren't like really doing it until he got medically separated from the Marines. And at that point, it was not really his choice. He just had to get out. And so we just decided to go for broke on real estate and move to Lincoln, Nebraska to get started on it.
Yeah. How did you decide on Lincoln as the location to make the move? Because it is different when people get out of the military trying to figure out you can go anywhere. It's kind of an open book.
Yeah. So previous to him getting out, we knew he was going to get out. It's kind of a long process getting out of the military.
Yeah.
And so we were analyzing a ton of different Midwest markets, and we knew we wanted rentals. We couldn't really make the numbers work in California. So we were looking at a lot of Midwest markets, Missouri, Ohio, and we wanted to pick a market where the numbers worked, but also where we wanted to live at too.
Yeah.
And so we would kind of just analyze different markets when our friends would get out or go back home. We'd be like, where's back home? Tell me about this town. Is it safe to be there? Because I was probably going to be at my flips by myself. So I wanted to be safe and have all the things we wanted to have in life, and just decided on Lincoln, Nebraska.
Yeah. And I mean, looking at it demographically, even then, the price point matches well. The opportunity for acquiring was good there. And your cost of living was really good, right? So you were able to go in knowing like, actually, we can buy some stuff here.
Yeah. It felt like everything was on sale, coming from Southern California.
Yeah, exactly.
I want that house.
Yeah.
But yeah. And then also it's a really strong rental market because there are multiple colleges, businesses were moving in, just a really good demographic.
Yeah, and that's a really good change because I know Pendleton well. My sister lives in Carlsbad, so I've been to Pendleton, and of course, there's areas that you can make acquisitions there, but it's a very high, big income driven marketplace in terms of getting in, especially in San Diego and surrounding there. So when you went to Nebraska, did you feel like, wow, the world has just opened up for opportunities?
Yeah, it's a lot easier being like a little fish in a little pond too than
Yeah.
being a little fish in a big ocean of San Diego where you have a lot of like even international money coming in.
Yeah.
And people can just pay cash for things that don't really make sense because they're hoping for the appreciation, where we needed the cash flow to live on. So we needed to go Midwest.
Yeah, and small fish, small ponds means building relationships will take you farther. Whereas, an open marketplace, like you said, with hundreds of investors, it is very hard to make, any headway there.
Mm-hmm.
But when you got to Nebraska, were you able to start doing that, building relationships to see where you're going to be able to find deals and who was doing what?
Yeah, that was so huge for us. We were able to, make good relationships with banks that would lend us 100% on the purchase and 100% on the rehab, and hard money guys that would do the same. And then, a lot of wholesalers and things. And it's easy to just stand out like in a market like that.
Yeah. And even going to Nebraska, though, you knew you were going to flip. How did you, I know you did the one unsuccessful out of state flip, but how did you know that was going to be something that you guys were going to be good at?
We didn't, but my husband didn't want to go back to school and like do that whole thing. And he had a really bad back injury. He couldn't stand for more than 15 minutes at a time. And so that was just felt like something that we could do and that I could do and make a good living on. And we actually moved into a travel trailer when we first moved there and parked it behind our flips as we're working on the projects. We would just live in the backyard in the travel trailer. And it cut our cost of living down to like almost nothing so that we could kind of prove to ourselves like we could do this, we could make it work. And we did that for about a year and then moved into a real house.
Yeah. Well, I talk about this a lot when couples are doing stuff together, but how important was it at that point for you two to be on the same page with that? Because some people might say, well, I don't really want to live in a travel trailer behind our flip property that's a disaster right now. That's really, I find it very hard for people to succeed if their partner is either completely uninterested or anti what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that would be really hard to do, especially if you're wanting to go at it very aggressively like we were, where we're going all in. I think if your spouse is not really on board, you can kind of do one on the side of like your real job or whatever. You don't have to move into a travel trailer and go nuts with it. But I think they'll kind of get on board once you go slow and it starts working, then they're more into it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, a proof of concept. I had Tyler and Zosha Madden on just a few episodes ago, and they talked about that. He was proving the concept, and then she was like, oh, actually, this looks pretty good. But you guys decided together, like, we're going all in, we're going to do this. And you picked a selective market where you could do it because the cost of living was going to be a little bit easier to start, right?
Yeah, for sure. And even Jeff is not like all about it. He is now at this point, but in the beginning, he was probably the more reserved one. He has a little bit more of like that employee mindset coming from the military. Yeah. And so you still have to figure out like how to work with your spouse if that is going to be your goal. And for us, it was just like, I was all on board on real estate, loved it, was obsessed with it. And he's like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. Cause I can't dream like you, but I'll do the work and I'll help you out. And so it just worked really well that way.
Yeah, and that fits, where he was coming from too with the military. Like, give me my list of stuff to do today. I'm going to knock it out. But then you can see the results build and build. And that's where I think it becomes more exciting. You need the building blocks to go. But then you're like, wait, we just made 50 grand. Okay. Yeah. Now I get it, right? You need that first result for it to make sense, all of the building blocks in the middle.
Yeah, definitely.
So when you started flipping, where were you finding the properties? And then what types of renovations were these, big or small?
The first one we did was on the MLS. So we had come back to visit to see if this was kind of the right market for us. And we ended up putting an offer on like a single family, a triplex, a quadplex, and got the single family. To go. Yeah. Got the single family. And I thought, okay, this will be like a $35,000 rehab. And it wasn't. It was $55,000, even with us doing all the work ourselves. Yeah. So it was it needed every single thing. And then from there, we just started doing all kinds of marketing, like bandit signs, cold calling, text blasting, and just throwing crap at the wall and see what sticks,
Yeah. I call it spray and pray, just like whatever comes back, I'll appreciate it.
Yeah. And then some of our hard money investors used to be flippers, or they were kind of transitioning out of that. So they started wholesaling us a lot of deals.
Yeah,
that's
great.
Still where we get a lot of our deals from, wholesalers.
Yeah. And I've always found that the best wholesalers are investors who ended up being really good at marketing and end up with overage. Mm-hmm. So the deals are okay. They just can't do, 9 deals at once. So those are great. Those are the relationships that you build to help the deal flow come in.
Yeah. And even right now, I've been networking with guys that are like way ahead of me. So they're now buying apartment complexes and they still get deal flow of these little single families and duplexes, but they don't want to deal with the little turd stuff. So they just like pass it off.
Yeah, and you're like, that turd looks pretty nice. Yeah. I like that turd.
I'm like, I'll buy those 9 houses that you don't want. And then you could take the big multifamilies.
Yeah. Let's go to this 100% bank financing, because I know this is something that you guys are really experienced at. And I think this is something where everybody's always looking to, if you look in all the forums, it's how can I do it with no money or low money down? I've always said you do need to have some backing, because the most people that are able to do that have some finances. That's why they're able to get the deals. But how did you start negotiating these deals and finding hard money and local banks who will go 100% on both? Because that is hard to find.
Yeah. So we first started working with hard money that would do 100%. They would do 100% purchase and rehab. But that was a local hard money. So there's local hard money and then there's national, and so the local hard money guys, they trust you, and they also know that if they have to take it back, they'll just flip it themselves.
Right.
It's less like emotional. And so we started with that. We were flipping a lot of houses on that 100% hard money, but at 20 or 18% was the interest rate we're paying. And then I started.
Yeah, that's the trade-off, right?
Yeah. So you got to give and take a little bit.
The points on that, or just 18 straight?
Nope, 18 straight. And that was kind of what was normal here, is they didn't charge points, but they charged a lot higher interest. And so we got really good at flipping very quickly. We could get in and out of a project in 30 days. And so that just became a line item in the budget, and it didn't really matter. But I couldn't do big projects, and I couldn't do like very long drawn out projects, because that 18% would eat us up. So then I started talking to local banks and saying, hey, I've been flipping on 18% hard money. They do 100% of the purchase and rehab. Would you guys be willing to do that? And they're like, well, if you could do it on 18%, you could do it at 4%. And I'm like, yeah, I really could. So with local banks, especially small ones in the Midwest, it is so much of a relationship game.
Yeah, for sure.
We just take them out, take them to lunch, like know them as a person and let them know us as a person. And then they want to be able to partner with what we're doing.
Well, partner is really the right word, because you made a great distinction between local hard money and national hard money. And I think when you're talking about banks, it's the same. Chase isn't going to come in and finance you and know you. They don't care. They don't even know who you are. But you can build those relationships. And that's where I think relationship skills are probably what helped you get into this situation. The point about local hard money was so good, because that local hard money knows the market. And you said specifically, they can just take the property and dump it afterwards if they have to. They understand the market, so they know the numbers. And if you're presenting the numbers right, that's going to be a much better sell than if you just contacted some, national hard money company who's just looking at the numbers.
Yeah. And those local hard money companies, they usually started out as flippers and got tired of that and build up cash and then become hard money. It's more passive, but it's also a good kind of a guard for newer investors, because if you take it to them, a deal to them, and you're like, these are the numbers, they're like, I don't think you're going to get that ARV in that neighborhood. And they know that very, very well, and like hyper local. Yeah. Then you can use that as like kind of, you're not going to get in trouble, because they won't let you get into trouble with their money.
Yeah. Because no one really wants to do a foreclosure. They want you to succeed. Then it's a win-win. Then you come back and keep doing it. That's how hard money lenders make the most money, especially locally. But again, partner is the key term. I think if they're able to do some due diligence on top of yours and say like, oh, yeah, you're a little off on this. You're working as partners, just like with the bank. Mm-hmm. You're like, hey, we're partners together. They want you to succeed, because that means repeat business. And that's much better for you too. You're like, I know who to go for. Yep. I can go to hard money, or I can go local bank. Like, these are my two people. And then that takes that question out of the equation, right?
Yeah. And if you know, like the local bank, you know who's making the decision there. It's not like, oh, we got to send this to underwriting. It's we're sending
Exactly.
this to loan approval, and they sit around in a table and
It's
they're like,
Bob.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's Bob and it's Joe and it's Sam. And they sit there and they're like, oh, Jeff and Megan, the other good people. And I like this deal. And this will be great for the community. And they're like, stamp. All right. Like, let's go for it. They like to be able to put on their website like that they're helping create housing for their community. And so if you can partner with them again so that they can be able to put the pictures on their website or talk about it, that helps them in what they're trying to do too.
Yeah, and I think the more you build the track record, the easier it is for them to just stamp it. Like, oh, that's 6 in a row. We don't even have to look. They've never been, wrong. Some make less profit than others, because things turn up behind the walls. But like that really does it. But don't you think like a brand new investor like you guys were then, with just a couple deals in there, they could still build a relationship with the local bank because the local bank will understand the dynamics of the property. And that's what's important. Same with the first time hard money. If you're good at building relationships and you're good at finding deals, you can get money.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And even if you have like some issues, like we didn't have W-2 income. So that's scary for especially normal banks. And then we didn't have 2 years of good tax returns. But our small local bank looked at how much we had donated to charities and knew that we must be writing off more than what was actual, you know what I mean? And so they recognized that our small tax returns was not actually indicative of how much money we were making.
Yeah. And that's where a small local bank can make a decision, whereas a national bank is just putting it through an algorithm that says, oh, no, that doesn't work.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I think people would hear, 18% and freak out, but I think they're missing the part that it's 100% loan, 100% rehab. Yeah. I mean, that is really amazing. And that gives you a lot of leeway to do the project the right way because you're just betting on yourself and you really have to get it correct because that 18% is a decent chunk each month.
Yeah. And it unlocks the amount of deals that you can do. And it unlocks that cash on cash return to be, infinite if you're not putting any money into it anyways. So then it's just a matter of like, we talk to the bank ahead of time before we get the deal. And we say like, how would you structure this? Would you want it to be at 80% loan to value? Would you want it to be at 75%? And then we just back into our deals with whatever financing that we know we can get.
Yeah. And have you found over time, now that you're so experienced in this Lincoln area, that you're just going to get deals brought to you because of your experience? People know, hey, you did that house over there and you did that. Is that happening now as you've gotten so much more experience?
Yeah, for sure. It's, everybody knows in town that we do that. I think my social media is a big factor in that too. And we've really pushed our Facebook branding hard for our properties company, so that people just text me, hey, you want a duplex? And I'm like, yep, I do, for sure. And then, it just kind of comes to us. We don't have to do as much marketing as we did in the beginning.
Yeah. And I think, a majority of my guests, of course, I've been following on social media and watching, but I think the authenticity of social media is what really helps on local home buying. National, cool. Somebody's probably selling a class on something, which is fine. But locally, if they can get into it and see like you're down the block, doing a flip, you're right there. They can drive by and see it. That really helps you in your local market too.
Yeah. And so many sellers will be like, oh, I follow you and I love what you do and it looks so nice and you do such good product and I just want to sell it to you because I want to see what you do with it. And then they'll usually ask to come take a look at it when I'm done. And we love that,
Yeah.
That's more social media content and throw it up on our page and it's all good.
Yeah, I always invite the owner back, no matter what type of distress it was in, just so they can see it. And I think you're right on what you're saying, is that I think people would be surprised that a lot of people do want that. I always describe it as like a caretaker. You're going to take over as a caretaker. You're going to upgrade it because they couldn't, for whatever reason. Maybe they wanted to move away. Maybe they didn't have the money, or maybe they didn't have the vision to do a renovation. But to see that you didn't knock the whole place down, that you still, brought the character through and adjusted things to make it more livable and also made money, it is exciting for them. I would like to see that if I had lived in a home for 40 years and just see what it looks like new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then a lot of times too, if it's like an inherited property, they'd be like, mom and dad would love to see it like this. Like it just fills them up and kind of gives them closure, I think, a lot of times.
Yeah, and much better, again, building a local home buying brand than to sell it to, Open Door or something, and then they just turn it into like an ugly McMansion with no character that everybody hates. And it's like they come back and like, well, it looks stupid. Like you just made it barren.
Yeah.
That's something that you guys have focused away from doing. I mean, you're really taking attention on the products here.
Yeah, definitely. And that's hard because if you are customizing each home, a lot of times it's kind of less profitable. You're the one usually that has to be touching it.
Yeah.
So we have systematized a lot of things and then just make little tweaks. But we try to not just do like the gray box, normal, flipper stuff.
We all just agree that gray is out. Please,
Yes,
everybody stop
please.
using gray floors or we're all going to die. Can't do it anymore. Yeah. So what's your percentage in terms of deals that you're flipping, holding, or doing something else with at this point?
I think we're probably flipping like 2/3 and keeping a third.
Yeah, that's a good percentage.
Yeah, it just kind of depends on the numbers. Either way, we want to be all in at 75%. And then if it cash flows, we keep it. If it doesn't, we flip it, which most things, it's very challenging to cash flow right now at 8%.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're just seemingly flipping more, but we are trying to kind of force that cash flow by doing like midterm rentals. We have a few sober living houses. So just kind of getting creative with trying to force a deal.
Yeah. And how'd you get into the sober living too? I just had Devana Kamei on, I think it's the episode before, and that was our first sober living. So now we're like backing right up to someone else who has some experience in the space because it's a different type of investment. It's definitely more of a you're doing something good. So you have to do it correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many different ways of doing sober living. There's like a for-profit model where you're actually running the programming.
Right.
And it almost seems more like you have a business and also you have real estate.
Right.
We do a very passive model, which we run to the Oxford House program. I don't know if Deanna was doing that too, but so it's super hands off. We rent to the program fills the beds. So for us, we just have these leases that are usually like 2 or 3 years, and then they take care of all the utilities and lawn and everything. And once it's become an Oxford House, they want to keep it an Oxford House forever.
Yeah.
So it's just no turnover for us. We love it.
Yeah, that's more of like an arbitrage model. And also like it's almost like triple net because they're going to pay for everything because they're running it as their full on business. You're just providing them the real estate.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And so now, with rates high, you're finding yourself, it's just going to be better to flip. But at least with your level of experience now that you always have so many multiple exit strategies. How are you deciding on the ones where you're like, could be a good flip, but midterm or short term could work in the area? Because I think even in the Midwest where people might have thought like, I don't know how midterm's going to work. It works everywhere if you know what you're doing. Have you found that?
Yeah. And I think for us, at least, it works the best for 1-bedroom units, whereas I would usually flip those or not even touch them.
Yeah.
Which a lot of times I can find on the MLS because they are so weird. But if it's a 1-bedroom or if it's like a 1-bedroom duplex, those have been working really well for us. We just got a duplex that was 1-1s and we got it for $155. Put like $20,000 into furnishing it and fixing it up a little bit. And then we rent it for $3,000 a month. And so I'm
midterm?
like, on midterm.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'll do that all day long, if I can make those kind of numbers work. So we've been just trying to find more of those.
Yeah, I love the quirky small houses. I've always been a huge fan of 2-bedroom single families just because I feel like you can buy them for way cheaper and they don't rent for much less than a 3-bedroom because usually the 3rd bedroom in a small house is tiny. It's like a babyish room anyway.
Yeah.
And then if you tack on midterm, I think you're right. I love 1-bed and even 1-bed office for midterm because that's really most people are traveling on their own or with a pet and it's the perfect landing spot for them.
Yeah, or with a spouse, and the spouse usually works from home or does some sort of like a online work. And so if you have that office, like you're saying, it's good returns. And we can usually get those vacancy filled within a couple days of it being on Airbnb or Furnish Finder. So there's a lot less vacancy. That seems weird because you would think you're turning it over more, so there'd be more vacancy, but it's actually much easier to fill.
Yeah, and especially if the MTR space isn't oversaturated, the people who are looking know like yours is a spot to go. There's just not that many options, and then it becomes almost a waiting list situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have you started to work with like insurance or other, you guys, I know you're both licensed realtors. I've always said that MTRs are like the key for realtors that they don't understand, because someone now, they'd like to sell, but they can't buy, rates are high. Maybe they want to, go into an MTR for, agree to 12 weeks while they're still looking for their next house. And then they can max out, the sale on their first house.
Yeah. So we only have like MTRs that are 1 or 2 bedroom units. So they're pretty low cost, but within the next month, we're going to be getting a 3 bedroom one that has like a large garage. And I think that's probably going to be more the play of like, hey, these people are in between real estate transactions. Yep. They want to be able to move all their stuff into this huge garage, be able to store it there, and then be able to live in the house and on that in between. So I think that'd be good.
I think it's the perfect match for realtors who understand investing also. It's like you can do it to your own clients. Hey, they want to sell. You're giving them a pitch. Hey, okay, great. We can sell. The market's super hot for sales. Inventory is low. You can make a lot of money, but you'd have to buy back into the same market. So maybe you want to take a little, a break and then do it here. And that can provide, a good 12, 16 weeks that's safe where they can look, know that they can close and still get out of it. I love that idea. I think
not have to do the like contingent offer and that whole thing.
Yeah. Well, because that's the thing, if you're contingent sell to buy, you're not going to get your highest price. And if you're contingent buy to sell, you can't win right now. I mean, barring something that just happens to be sitting on the market, which in most, markets means it's got some problems.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're alleviating that. And it's always the thing of like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do in the middle, and short-term rentals wind up costing too much. So the midterm rental option is perfect. You pay a little bit more, but you only there 12 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and like you said, with the garage, it's great too, because then they don't have to store their unit. We used to say, get a pod, put it in the pod, go to a short term. But with midterm, if you have a garage, like just unload the stuff into the garage and then just take it out when you find a place.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Jonathan. Thanks for listening to another episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. On this brief interlude, I wanted to tell you that we have a mailing list. I actually don't love mailing lists. There's so much. This is not an automated mailing list where you get on a drip campaign. These are written once a month, will eventually be at once a week again by me, direct, and they're not spammy. So if you want to sign up for our mailing list, you can go to bit.ly/streamlined with a D mail. Bit.ly is bit.ly/streamlined mail. See you there. Yeah. So as you guys grow, are you looking to diversify into, apartment buildings, or are you really comfortable with what you're doing right now?
We have a 7-plex right now, and I call it my 7-plex from hell. And it's just
well, so maybe that's the answer right there.
It's gone terribly. So right now I'm just like totally avoiding multifamily at the moment. Yeah. But I think that was a bad purchase on my end, and I didn't really do due diligence. I walked through it and got kind of overwhelmed. It was like, whatever, it's fine. It's so cheap, very poorly constructed, terrible tenants. So just the complete crap storm of everything that could happen happened. Not to say that I'm not going to do more multifamily, but I just, I can flip 10 houses and not think about it at all. And I've put so much brain power and energy into this 7-plex. And it's like, for what? Why am I trying to recreate the wheel or get into something I don't really know? With that being said, we just walked like a 58 unit package that does have an 8-plex and a quadplex and a 6 duplexes and a ton of single families. But even that, I'm looking at it more like a huge giant flip than the multifamily game right now.
Yeah. I love a portfolio deal because you can siphon some off. You take them as a whole and like, okay, the 8-plex don't want that. This floorplex looks great, can do 2 midterms, 2 long terms. So you can kind of, choose what you want to do. You can wholesale a few of them, do whatever you want while you're in there. So why did you decide though on the 7-plex? Were you at a point where you thought that you guys are like, hey, look, multi is kind of the next step, and then realized like, no, this is hell?
Yeah, I was probably like bored. I get bored and then I get in my own way, I think.
Yeah.
And it probably felt like this is the next step or whatever. Yeah. It was $420,000 too. So at some point you're like, that's so cheap for 7 units. Like it's got to be a good deal, And then it's not. It's put $300,000 into it or whatever. So
yeah. Well, then, and you've built systems around flipping. You have this way of doing it, and then now this is that system does not go over and work well for this. Was that part of it, that in addition to the building being crap and the tenants being difficult, the systems that you set up are not the same systems you would put onto the 7-plex?
Yeah, that's some of it for sure. And then, there's just a lot of learning curve. There's a whole nother layer of, we have it's what's called a COC inspection. So like an occupancy inspection for multifamilies, but I've never had to deal with that for single families.
Yeah.
And then for the building permit process, it's now commercial. And so it has a whole different system for how you do the permits. Whereas on single families and duplexes, I can pull up my own permits and I don't have to have like all the mechanical stuff. And so there's
you can do drawings for single family, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Just
like
on
really
a napkin.
Just a drawing.
Exactly. and they don't really care about the mechanical stuff. They're like, it's probably fine. But this was, commercial. And so now I needed all these mechanical drawings and it has to be structurally re-engineered. And I'm like, it's not a skyscraper, folks. Like, it's one level little turd, but they make it a big old deal. And so it's been a learning experience for sure.
Yeah. So what are you going to have you stabilized that, and then are you going to sell it and just get rid of it? Cause it is the kind of the one that you're just hanging around your neck that weighs too much.
I've thought about selling it, but I think I would lose money at this point. And so I feel like the only way to save it is to go forward with it completely. So we've stabilized 2 of the 3 buildings. So 4 of the 7 units.
Yeah.
And then the third or the other 3 units are down to the studs. And we financed that one where we would have to put in 10% of our money, and they would finance the 90% of the purchase and 100% of the rehab, or what should have been 100% of the rehab, except it all went to hell. And so we ran out of money on that line. And I went back to that small local bank and I said, this is what happened. We had to pay for 5 sewer lines and this thing and that thing, and listed it off. And I said, so I'm out of money and I'm out of time. Do you want it back? And they're like, no, we don't want it back. Yeah. So I'm like, well, okay, can you give me more money? Can you give me more time? And they said yes to both of those. So we're getting it reappraised so that they can give us some more money on that line. As I realized that we were going to run out of money on it, I switched to making all of those midterm rentals. So it'll be valued based off of the income that it's bringing in. And I was able to get double the rents than if it was a long-term rental.
Yeah.
So they should be able to give us quite a bit more money on the valuation. Yeah. So we'll save it, I think.
That's a smart, though. I mean, having 4 of the 7 units stabilized, then at midterm, you're just like, 1.6 to 2xing your income and then appraisal value. So that even with the one down to studs, that's going to help you at least get the time and money to get it stabilized. And then maybe you wait a couple of years and still decide, well, now we're back to even or a little bit in the plus. Let's let somebody else, have at it because you fixed it. So they're walking into a better asset than you walked into.
Yeah. And in all reality, once it's stabilized, I do think it'll be a great deal if you're okay with running it as a midterm rental.
Yeah.
It's been renting out great for us. And then by the time we're done with it, it's going to have all new everything. So it should be a really good asset.
Yeah. So across your midterm rental units, though, these are all in or around Lincoln, Nebraska. Who's your clientele coming in? Because I think that's interesting. It's different in each area who's coming in and how somebody's getting their midterms, whether it's, like you said, Airbnb or Furnish Finder. Those are different clientele.
Yeah. Most of ours are traveling nurses. Some of ours are coming in for the universities. There's 2 different universities. So we'll get like people coming in for internships or even like coaches that are coming in and coaching for a season, but they don't know if they're going to be able to stay. So it just kind of depends. We're all over the place.
Yeah, I think universities underknown is that you have a lot of international students and their family doesn't come for just a week. They're going to come for like 3 months a lot of the times if they don't get to see them. And that's another win. So it's really, it's been cool to see the development of midterm, short term in college areas because it's much better than people think. My kids are college age and I can see it as like, this is where people want to go. And then maybe they can enjoy the area as well, instead of just like swinging up for a weekend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even parents of like college kids will come and stay for the summer to kind of hang out with their kids or whatever. So it just kind of depends. The the sevenplex is not in an area near any hospitals. So I was a little bit worried about it working as an MTR, but we haven't had any issues at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Let's talk staging a little, because that's hugely important. And you have a staging company as well. Have you seen that part of your business explode? Because it's so necessary now in all forms of marketing for, regular traditional real estate listings. I always think, like, I don't know why it wouldn't be staged. It doesn't cost that much. And if it's brand new, you might as well make it look lived in so they can get the feeling of home. Mm-hmm. But for short term and midterm, it's obviously absolutely important. How much has that business changed since you've been doing it?
It's been huge here. So when I first started staging because I felt like there was just a void in the market. I was listing a flip and I wanted to stage it. Yeah. And I couldn't get a price for it. And I'm calling all these staging companies and I'm like, how much is it going to be? They're like, we got to charge you $100 consultation fee and tell you how much it's going to be. And I'm like, it's 1,500 square feet. Like, you don't need to come look at it. They're all the same. It's 1,500 square foot ranch. You could picture it. It's going to be $2,000. It's going to be $4,000. Like, give me a ballpark. They wouldn't do it. I'm like, this is so dumb. It doesn't need to be this hard. I'll just do it myself. And so I started doing it for myself and my flips, and started it for my husband's listings, and then started doing it for other clients. And our whole model is just like, I'm going to tell you the price over the phone. It's a basic staging package. This is how much it is.
Yeah.
And we've really changed, I feel like, the face of real estate here, because before, all of the first time home buyer price points, like those houses did not get staged before. It was just the, new builds and high end stuff. And now we've made like a very affordable model and just make it easy. And then it's huge, like the difference between how fast a staged house sells and how slow an unstaged doesn't. And so, yeah, it's been good for us. We do about 80 to 100 houses a year.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think people from the outside don't understand that it helps you for it to be affordable, because then you don't need to warehouse as much stuff. You want to take it from one. Oh, wait, now we have another one coming up on Smith Street. Let's take this staging, bring it over to there, mix and match, of course, a couple of things. But you don't want to have, 50 homes in a warehouse.
Yeah.
Then you need more warehouse space to do. How are you managing that? Is that kind of what you're looking for, just to make sure you're moving from one to the next and not warehousing as much as you need to?
Yeah, I think we have about 20 sets, and we do just kind of move them around like that. I think one of our big kind of things that we do is it's all very neutral. A lot of staging companies will have like pops of yellow and pops of blue, and we try to stay away from that because it is much easier to mix and match, and we don't have as much inventory that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, just little things like that.
Yeah, I the one thing that I see that drives me insane is people who, whether they're new or experienced, they flip a house and then they leave it vacant and they don't stage it. It's like, I've seen this in New Jersey, up to like $3 million house, brand new, really nice, and then just looks like no one's ever lived there. It's like, you could just stage it and give it some personality. Don't you think it gives people a much better look on what it's going to be when they live there? And I don't know why everybody doesn't do it. It's not that expensive.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times, especially guys, like they can picture how it will be set up to live. And I think that women have a really hard time like spatially reasoning like that. And so they'll walk into a room and they're like, well, it doesn't have any spot for a dining room table. You're like, it's open concept. Put it wherever you want it.
Yeah,
right. But if you put a dining room there, then they're like, oh, this is lovely. It feels like home.
Yeah.
And it's just mind boggling that they can't, make that leap. And so I think a lot of real estate investors don't understand that they can't. And they're probably leaving money on the table by not staging.
Well, yeah, they may be the same flippers who are putting like 6 accent walls in every homes, but that's beside, probably dark gray as well. Yeah. But yeah, and I think, you were mentioning the dining room table, but I look at it as the TV also, because everybody's always looking like, where are we going to gather? And some houses that are funky don't have like, if you just look at it, you're like, well, the fireplace, that looks high. You have to actually show them how it's all going to work, or they just may take a pass because they couldn't see it. And virtual staging is just not for me. It's like one of my it's like the devil's baby to me. I want nothing to do with it, because I think if you show the virtual in the photos, then people have built up an expectation, and then they show up and there's nothing there, and they're on a downward trend instead of like on the upward, like, wow, this looks great. And that's staging.
Yeah, they're like disappointed. They walk in, they're like, "Oh, this was way
I
cuter in the
thought
pictures."
they were going to be nice.
Yeah, yeah, and like you said with the funky layouts, like even our new builds. I don't know if this is just Lincoln. They don't understand like how to build a house. I don't know, but they just lay out things super weird. Even when I walk in to stage it, I'm like, "What are you guys doing? Where am I supposed to put anything?" And so if I feel that way, and I do this for a living, like for sure a buyer is going to feel that way. And so if you can put couches and you can make it make sense, then buyers will be like, oh, this is nice. They sit on the couch, they stare at the painting on the wall that's in the spot where you would put your TV, and they're like, oh yeah, this is fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I especially for bedrooms too, because as you get to the smaller bedrooms, not the primary suite, like sometimes it just looks confusing because they put the windows in the wrong spot and nobody wants the bed under the windows. So once you can kind of curate the rooms and show what a home office will look like, that like you said, you're answering the questions for buyers in advance, and that's what you need to do. And a big box, whether it looks nice or not, they still can't make those decisions. It's going to be much harder for them to say yes because they're not going to be able to do that calculation in their mind and see it. They just can't do it.
Yeah, definitely. And even I would say that it makes more sense for little houses, like you're saying, they get kind of confused by that. Is they're like, can I even fit a queen bed in this master bedroom? Because we have a lot of like 100-year-old houses and there's not really a master bedroom. Like they're all just little tiny dinky bedrooms. So you could put a queen bed in there and you could put a little dresser and a little nightstand. They're like, okay, I get it. Like it'll fit.
Yeah. I don't know. I've asked people why they don't, they have a new build, and I ask why they don't stage it. Oh, it doesn't need it. And I'm like, well, I mean, this just sounds stupid.
Yeah, they're just
it definitely needs it. Yeah, I agree. But it's really not that expensive, because if you do it right, you should be sold and gone within, 30 days or 60 days with the closing and everything, depending on where you are. I mean, that's just not going to be a big spend. If you can, you'll definitely get 2, 3, 4x the cost of staging on top of what you would without it. Do you agree with that?
I do. Yeah. I think the NAR did a survey or some kind of a study, and they said that staged houses sell for 9% more than unstaged houses. And usually it's 1% or something of the house cost is the cost of staging. So, I mean, it way more than pays for itself. I think that people just kind of go like, it doesn't actually add any value to the home. So why would I spend the money on it? And they're just being cheap in all reality.
Yeah. If it's so crazy though, because you spend whatever, say it's a big reno, you spend 6 months doing a reno and then you just like leave it. Because those are often, in my experience, and I've of course been licensed for 10 years, like the ones that don't stage are also like not clean. They're like kind of 97% done.
Yeah.
And you're like, there's still dust everywhere. It's like, wow, you guys are really like, you're just giving up money instead of providing an experience is what sells houses. They don't, their descriptions are one line, they're not putting it in. And from doing all sides as an investor and then turning out a product, like this is all part of marketing. And I think that a lot of people are leaving money on the table by passing on these things that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think they do these huge 6-month projects and they're just so done at the end that they're like, I don't even care, just list it. And then you get these dirty houses that are mostly renovated with camera phone pictures. And you're like, guys, you're so close. You could have got the bidding war and you just pooped the bed at the last second.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of builders, they're going to the next job. So when they're at 97%, they don't want the crew to stay there because it's not a full day, but then it's 97%. Then your inspection goes bad because they didn't vent the dryer, or they didn't do something. They don't have the exhaust in the bathroom just because they were like, didn't have a full day of work. But that's just that again, that's another problem for me. Again, go on a tangent about that.
If a house is staged, people walk in and they're like, oh, that's cute. Oh, I like this couch. Oh, this is cute. And if it's not, they pick apart all those things. Like you could put staging in that dusty, dirty, kind of dinked up, need some touch up paints here and there. And it would be like night and day difference. You'd be like, this is not okay. And then this is fantastic. And just that right there pays for itself, that your buyer isn't in there picking apart all this little stuff.
Yeah. And that goes to the 97% finish too. You may think that it's there, but then once they find one thing that, well, they didn't put that in, well, what else is missing? Then what's behind the walls? They freak themselves out. Where if you just went to 100%, did a full cleaning, staged it, you're taking away all of the naysayers who are going to, I mean, you're always going to have nitpickers, but they're never going to find a home. So you just want to take away those little things that could detract somebody.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So in terms of assets, now you're finding most of your deals from people local wholesalers, and the investors that who have overage that they think is small, and you're like, that's my wheelhouse.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we're doing some like pay per click, pay per lead type of marketing. I think, we've done all the things in the past. We've done the cold calling and the text blasting. And I think a lot of those you get tire kickers or people that are like, yeah, sure, make me an offer. And I don't want to waste my time going, looking at it, making an offer, dealing with these like pissed off, why are you guys calling me kind of calls and messages. And so I want people that are reaching out to us and being like,
Exactly.
please take my house. And then I'll actually waste my time on it. So we've been doing a lot of those like pay per lead kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think you want people always coming in your direction. I've had the same experience. Whenever I did like more mass marketing, the appointments just became worse and worse. It was all those people who were like, oh, I want 500. And I'm like, you're not worth more than 315. So why did I drive 20 minutes to get here? Like, this is just idiotic, waste of my time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if a new investor came to you now and they asked you, like, they want to get started, where would you tell them to get started based on your experience? They're interested in flipping, but I'm always nervous for first-time home flippers. So what would you tell someone who's coming at them? They have some money to get started. They just don't know what to do.
I would probably say get good at finding deals and just start analyzing a ton of deals. Put something under contract when you feel like it's a really good deal, and then probably partner with a flipper that's already doing it if you want to not lose money on your first flip or lose some money on your first flip. And that's a good education to pay for. You'll learn a ton, but if you don't want to lose that money on the first deal, find a flipper that is doing it, that is honest, that knows your market really well, and just partner with them.
Yeah, I love a mini JV for a first flip, even if you're only putting in like 10,000, and they're like, "Hey, thanks, that'll pay for the AC," and then you get 11,000 when you're done, but you get all of the knowledge of looking and watching it work. That's a great, safe solution for a first one. And one thing I wanted to ask you, because you said you did a long distance flip first, and then obviously when you got to Lincoln, you're walking the properties yourself. I've always said that I find newer investors now, because technology is so insane, that they're spending a lot of times looking at deals, but not looking at deals in real life. And I think that's where a lot of people are losing money. Do you see any difference for when you flipped out of state and when you're doing it, getting to know the locals? And now, of course, all the blocks, a lot. You can tell from the photos what's going to be there.
Yeah.
But give me a little bit of info from what you found in your experience based on seeing enough reps in person, which I think is really important.
Yeah, I think it's really important too. I think that even if you're not making offers, you're just walking a ton of houses, you find out so much, right? You find out like what are the normal things for that age of a house or that area in a neighborhood, which could be virtual. It sucks for everybody in California trying to get started on it, So I
get
it.
Just take a trip and go back.
Yeah. But I would say that even if you are trying to do like out of state, pick one specific spot. I see so many new people that are like, oh yeah, I'm kind of looking in Ohio or maybe Alabama, or like, oh, you're in Nebraska, that could work too. And I'm like, literally any of it will work. You just pick one and then get hyper local. And what I say to do is get a map of that area and start drawing on it. Look at the crime statistics, draw those hot spots on that map. Look at your school zones, whether they're good schools, bad schools, middle schools, in-betweens, whatever. Color those on the map. And then look at, okay, where is your downtown area, your walkable, cool, like bar scene, and know those like the back of your hand, and start to realize like, okay, for us, this is a grid system. So we have numbers going this way and letters going this way, so that when somebody says, hey, I got a house at 1300 A Street, it's 13th and A, and you already know it's in the ghetto. So like, you don't have to waste a whole lot of time with it, and start to learn those like neighborhoods block by block, even if you are doing it virtually. And you can go on like Google Maps, Google Street View, walk down the street, and you're like, okay, these all have bars on the windows and there's a pawn shop. Clearly I'm not in the best area of town,
Yeah.
And you can kind of really get to know an area. At least, I don't know, that'll help.
I think that's great. And I think, if you work into that system, a weekend trip, so you can just see it, so and then when you go down Google the block, you're like, oh, wait, I remember that. Because of course it can be 2-3 years old, but you get a much better vibe. That's really, really good advice for new investors, because you could do your invest on your research on the one area and then decide, the numbers aren't working, but you didn't lose time on that, because now you can take everything that you learned and just put it into another. Because I agree, you look in forums and someone's like, I'm interested in investing in Texas. I'm like, do you know how big Texas is?
Yeah.
Like Houston's a country.
Yeah.
Like they're just not getting it. And even in small states, people are like, oh, well, I'll just do New Jersey. I'm like, we're small, but like it's the densest state. What are you talking about? Like South Jersey is not the same as North Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that mentality of, I think they're looking for someone to tell them where to go. And that's what always leads you into a click funnel that you're probably not going to be happy with.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, you can invest in real estate anywhere. Just pick a spot, and then figure out how to invest in that spot.
Yeah, but I mean, I love your idea of putting out the map and kind of, okay, this area is a no, so that when you're looking and you're like, that's a deal, let me just put it on the grid. Nope, that's not the area, because I think you're setting up a system that's going to be much more efficient for you as a looker. And I think when you take your cities down to a very, very small number, you become much better in that area, which gives you, again, a much higher likelihood of success instead of looking in multiple counties for, the thing that new investors say when I say like, oh, well, what are you looking for? Well, I'll take a deal anywhere. It's like, well, I'm never going to work with you.
Mm-hmm.
As a realtor, that's like the last thing that we want to hear, because you just want me to do all the work and I don't want to be responsible for your bad decisions.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So last thing before we hop off, how important has it been to your investing trajectory to be a real estate agent and having all the access to information and properties from that end?
I think it's huge. Originally, my husband got licensed, so he was a realtor first. And so I would go on to like our off-market appointments, seller appointments, and I would do all the wholesaling stuff. And we try to keep those two things very separate, retail and the wholesaling stuff. Now they made a law that's like only agents are allowed to wholesale, or that you have to have an agent in the middle in Nebraska. Yeah. And so that's when I got my license. It was all right. Well, I guess they just gave me permission to do it.
Yeah.
But even in the beginning, when it was just Jeff, I think being able to have even the access to opening the doors on our own.
Yep.
We've gotten so many deals where we're sitting on the couch at 8:00 on a Saturday and like, dude, this thing just popped on the market. Let's go right now. And we'll just grab all the kids and go look at it. Otherwise, I'd have to schedule it with my agent, and like maybe she's busy and people have lives other than looking at real estate.
Or they don't want to go look at a dump. They're like, "Ooh, this looks gross." You're like, "That's the point."
Yeah, like it doesn't even have electricity. It's dark out. I'm like, I don't care. It's fine. I got a flashlight.
Bring flashlight, and we have to sign to hold harmless. Great.
Yeah, I'm like, this is my kind of deal right here.
Yeah.
But so I think it's super helpful, and then be able to pull our own comps and be very like sure of that when writing offers.
Yeah, I think it's huge. I think if you're going to use it the right way, it's just a gigantic asset to an investor. And of course, then you can turn it into an agent business by working with investors, since most agents have no clue about investing. And all of us know that, who used agents before we were licensed, and we're like, wow, they were really useless. So it is a big service. And now I think you've probably found that you can really collaborate all these things together, because when you're doing off market and then you have a license and somebody's like, well, I want top dollar, the market's hot. You're like, great, let's list it.
Yep.
And then they're like, wait, I don't want any open house. And you're like, cool, let me buy it. Your toolbox is just bigger than when you don't have a license and you're only like, hey, I can buy this for cash, or I can seller finance, or we can do sub 2. It just gives you more access to do more things.
Yeah. And I think that some people don't like to have a license because they're like, you have a fiduciary responsibility. You can't just like trick the sellers into selling it for less. And I don't think that's actually a real problem. If you've gone on enough appointments, you can tell people like, hey, I will buy it for $180,000, or I think that we could list it for $220,000. And they're like, no, I hate realtors. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take that hat off and I can just buy it for $180,000. Does that work for you? And they're like, yes. Or they're like, I already talked to my cousin. She's an agent. She said the same thing, but I just don't want to have to deal with all that stuff. I'm like, all right,
and
cool.
some sellers do like to know that you do have a fiduciary duty because you have a license, even if they choose not to go the listing way, because it's regulated. You could get in trouble, whereas the wholesalers, most of them are doing a lot of weird stuff across the country, just in terms of not fully informing somebody what's happening. And when you have that duty, you at least need to inform them on the process and let them make a choice, which could be anything, but more options.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Megan, where is the best place for people to find you? I believe that it's Instagram, and it's The Tatty Investor, right?
Yep. Instagram.
No, but wait. Yeah. The Tatty Investor.
The Tatty Investor with underscores between the words.
Oh, okay. For Instagram, right? Yep. The _Tatty _investor. And then your website is taddyinvestor.com, right?
Yep.
Yep. And you guys have a Facebook page as well. That's the Taddy Investor also?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you spending the time. I think we got a good wide scope on local investing, which I think is really important for people who start out of state and are looking and able to move to an area, because you guys picked an area and really did go all in, and it's working quite well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having the time. Yeah, no, it was great to talk to you, and I look forward to staying in touch.
All right. Sounds good.
Awesome. That was Megan Ahern, the Taddy Investor. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next episode. Wait, you have reached the end of the show. This is the part where you're going to get ready to check out, but I've actually changed this part. For over 120 episodes, you heard the same thing. Well, now I've changed it. I've thought about doing intros to the next episode, but I'm going to hold off on that for now. These are my pitches at the end. I've got nothing to sell you at all, but I do want to remind you that it really would help us if you support the podcast in the right way. All that means is subscribing to the podcast so you get it on Monday and Thursday, writing us a 5-star review if you believe that we deserve a 5-star review, sharing it with your friends, and being a participant in the Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing community. Soon there's going to be a new website launched. Maybe when you're listening to this, it's already going to be out there. That's where we're going to have collaboration. You're going to be able to see a lot from the guest. It is coming soon, and I just want to tell you, from me to you, I don't know how I got here, over 100 episodes. I'm so appreciative of you listening to the podcast and especially sticking around to hear this part. We'll see you next episode.